Hello and welcome to our Wellness Matters webinar. Delighted that you've chosen to spend a bit of time with us here this evening. We have been offering at Rivers Edge Counseling Center these webinars every month, often 2 or 3 times a month for about 6 years now. And it's been a silver lining of COVID that we have learned to offer them as a webinar and had the opportunity to connect with even more people. Our presenter this evening is one of the members of the Rivers Edge Counseling Center team, Ramona Kottke-Gap. Ramona is a registered psychologist, and she has been helping people for many years to identify strengths, meet goals, and to reach their full potential in business and in life. Ramona has a unique and very broad set of skills that she's gained through years of work in the corporate world as a trainer, volunteering in schools and with children's organizations, and providing counseling and group therapy for survivors of domestic violence. Ramona specializes in the needs of families and children, and she provides counseling on our team to clients of all ages and walks of life. She offers individual counseling for adults as well as family and couples therapy and working with children as well. In her work, she utilizes a client-centered, strength-based approach and employs evidence-based methods such as cognitive behavioral therapy, solution-focused therapy, art therapy, play therapy, and social skills training. Whoever her clients are, Ramona focuses on meeting them where they are at, and she is passionate about empowering them to attain their goals, whatever those might be. I'm really glad that you have chosen this particular topic for our webinar this evening, Ramona. We know this is such a difficult time for so many people, and all of us, whether we are experiencing feelings of depression ourselves or not. If we aren't, there's a very good chance someone that we love is. So this is very timely, especially now. So Ramona, we've got the hour together. When Ramona has finished her presentation, we'll have some time for conversation and questions. So feel free to stay for that if you'd like. And I will be keeping my eye on the chat throughout Ramona's presentation, as well as the Q&A screen as well. So you can see those controls at the bottom. Feel free to say hi, to post your questions, and we will pick up on them at the end. And with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Ramona.
Okay, all right. Well, welcome everybody. So, yeah, when I was preparing for this webinar to do it 2 weeks ago, things were a little bit different. And then there was a bit of a delay. And so then getting ready for the webinar tonight, over the last couple of days, I thought, boy, I was feeling really the weight of this topic at this time. So I just hope I'm going to do it some justice and help you out. Hopefully find some little tidbits that will help you and hopefully find something that you're looking for here. All right. So you have depression, or does depression have you? Even after you've successfully navigated through your first bout, actually, that you will experience depression again and again throughout your lifespan. Because depression is a highly recurrent disorder, it's important to develop coping skills to manage the symptoms during an episode, to learn from the experiences, build resiliency, and build healthier ways of coping to prepare and brace yourself for the inevitable future episodes. So times are tough and COVID-19 stinks. Government-imposed mandatory restrictions feel oppressive and frustrating. Masks are uncomfortable. Things just feel hard. So if having depression wasn't bad enough already, the added stressors of a pandemic have the potential to push the most vulnerable among us to serious breaking points, the kind of breaking points that we do not like to talk about, breaking points that can make us feel really uncomfortable. But talking about distressful and negative feelings, and yes, even suicidal thoughts, is precisely one of the prescribed and necessary treatments for depression. Developing coping skills such as feeling your feelings and tolerating distress is what helps people to live well with depression. All right, so that's what went with that slide. All right, so over the course of the next little while here, up to 1 hour, I'll be discussing some important considerations. I'm going to present a couple of and share. I'll talk about what can be done in the midst of a depressive episode, and I'll talk about how to embrace depression as a state of being rather than as an enemy to be battled with. I'll show you ways to prepare for the inevitable recurring symptoms of depression that seem to lurk below the surface. Living well with depression. We'll talk about what depression is and what causes it. We'll talk about risk factors, what makes us vulnerable to getting depression, knowing thyself, I call it, treatment approaches, learning to feel feelings, embracing and talking about emotions. And then we will, I'm going to issue a challenge at the end to do some self-care. All right. Okay. So yeah, not yet. So understanding the disorder better and gaining knowledge of available treatments will empower you to live better with depression. By the end of the webinar, you'll be more informed and better prepared to compassionately care for yourself the next time that your black dog is nipping at your heels. Nicole, are you there?
I am here. Are you ready for the video?
I am ready for the video, yeah.
We're straining our competence here to take turns sharing our screen, but this is what worked best for us. So here we go. I'm going to share the black dog. I want to make sure I do it so that you can hear the sound. There we go.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learnt that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
All right. Okay. So depression is a mood disorder, but it is much more than just feeling down or sad or blue. At its worst, depression leaves you feeling devoid of feelings altogether. Depression is a persistent, enduring pattern of behavior that negatively affects your quality of life. According to the World Health Organization, depression is the #1 cause of human suffering, with the largest group of depression sufferers in the 25 to 44 age group. Depression is a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Depression can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems and can decrease your ability to function at work and at home. Fortunately, though, it is treatable and people can live well, even with depression. If you were a client with depression visiting me in my office, and after I asked you the usual, so what brings you to therapy today? If you said, I'm struggling with depression, I would say, tell me more. And it's possible that as tears well up in your eyes, you tell me about this feels like moving a mountain just to get out of bed in the morning and shower. You might talk about aches and pains and mental fog and guilt. And perhaps you would describe the feeling of waking up with depression as if in the night someone had poured wet cement down your throat. Morning, the cement. You might describe how your mind often races a mile a minute, yet your body denies you. I would go on to ask you more about your symptoms. I would ask you about the level of severity. What is the impact of your depression on your daily life? I would ask, how often are you experiencing your symptoms? How frequent do you notice feeling overwhelmed and sad? What does living with depression look like for you? If you are someone who lives with depression, it's a really good idea to take notes about how you feel on a regular basis. People with depression engage in much more negative and all or nothing thinking, black and white thinking, more than people who are not depressed. And living well depends on knowing these things about ourselves when we're depressed and finding ways to mitigate it. So charting your mood through good times and bad times in a mood journal is a great way to improve your overall perspective. Tracking your mood can assist you with deciding when you need to ask for help, take a break, lighten your load, or do some self-care. If you hear yourself trying the old, it's always awful, or I never have any good days, then you will have your daily mood journal to provide you with evidence that every often there are some through the clouds, even in the worst storms. The symptoms of depression can vary from mild to severe, and they can include feeling sad or having a depressed mood, fear of judgment, shame, and guilt. Like we heard in the video, keeping up the emotional lie is just exhausting. We see relationship issues. With the irritable moods and lack of motivation, it truly is hard to be around someone who is depressed. There's difficult thinking, trouble concentrating, problem making decisions. The quality of thought is impaired. In depression, we see highly repetitive and negative thinking, loads of negative assumptions about the future. Depressed people have a generalized negative outlook on life. There are thoughts of death and suicide, loss of energy or increased fatigue. See an increase in purposeless physical activity, inability to sit still, pacing, hand wringing, bouncing up and down, or slowed movements or speech. Those actions must be severe enough to be observable by others. There's loss of interest or pleasure in activities that you once enjoyed. There's poor job performance, more work-related accidents, feeling worthless or guilty, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, and changes in appetite, weight loss or weight gain unrelated to dieting. And often with depression, they're usually observable, more easily observable by the people around you. You might be feeling like you're really in a funk, but it's the people, your loved ones around you, that will confirm that for you and say, yeah, things have really changed for you since, a month and a half ago. All right, that's not in the right place. Okay, causes of depression. There's often no obvious, reasonable explanation for depression. It might sometimes be triggered by a stressful event, but it might also come out of the blue when your life is seemingly going just fine. Sometimes people have childhood trauma or insecure attachment, and sometimes they have what you would consider to be typical early childhood experiences. The beginnings do not always predict the end when it comes to depression. When we look at why people are depressed, it's important to consider all the possible reasons, including the biological factors, the psychological factors, and social. And so when we look at the biological, we have genetics. Some of the strongest evidence for a genetic contribution to depression is the increase of risk in relatives who suffer from depression. A person who has a first-degree relative who suffered major depression has an increased risk for the condition of 1.5 to 3 times more than someone who doesn't have a relative with depression. And when we look at the vast number of parents who have depression, it becomes clear why it's important to find suitable and effective treatments to help people live well. And then there the balance of the brain chemicals is crucial for healthy mood and behavior. Some of the neurotransmitters that might be out of balance when a person is depressed are serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, glutamate, and GABA. Antidepressant medications are prescribed in hopes of correcting the imbalance and increasing feelings of well-being. And then there's viruses and systematic inflammation. So pathogens acting directly on the brain have been related to psychiatric symptoms. A Danish study examined the medical records of over 3 million people, and they found that a history of hospitalization for infection was associated with 62% increased risk of later developing a mood disorder. So, having a virus, getting stuck. In addition, having an autoimmune disorder increases the risk of future mood disorders by 45%. And there's a number of medical conditions. One of the most common complications of chronic illnesses is depression. Professionals are advised to always check first for medical conditions before ascribing a mental disorder diagnosis. Depression is prevalent among patients with chronic illnesses, heart attack, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, cancer, diabetes, and chronic pain. Chronic stress increases cortisol, the stress hormone, and indirectly reduces brain neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine, and that contributes to depression. And then there's medications that can be a cause for depression. So if you're taking beta blockers for heart condition or Accutane for acne, and some birth controls, that could be a cause for your depression. And dietary issues. We know that vitamin D has been linked to depression, a deficiency in vitamin D. So that's one of the things that if you're not already supplementing with vitamin D, that's something you can do. And research has found that men who consumed 67 grams or more of sugar per day were 23% more likely to be diagnosed with depression than men who ate 40 grams of sugar a day or less. So sugar is bad and can be a cause for depression. Social stressors. Depression is indicated when there's loneliness, job dissatisfaction, and marital discord. We have the cognitive distortions, which we're going to talk more about, unhelpful thinking styles, and personality. Some personality types might be at a higher risk of depression, such as the highly sensitive people, or people that have a troubled childhood. Loss of meaning or purpose. People who struggle to find meaning in their life or with concepts such as death might develop existential depression or a loss of motivation to search for meaning or purpose. And there's the social factors. Being a minority comes with its package of social pain. People in minority groups report feeling more guilt, embarrassment, shame, and sadness than people their status. There's family influence. We know that children of depressed parents are very likely to become depressed too, but it's not just because of the genetics. Children learn by modeling. Depressed parents cannot teach what they don't know. Observing persistent patterns of negative thinking and ruminating teach children how to act depressed, and they end up feeling depressed. And what we know is that parents who are depressed can't teach their children what they don't know. So there's some coping skills that are important for, for children to know that they don't get taught by their depressed parents. And then we have adverse childhood experiences, such as abuse, neglect, losing one or both parents, or witnessing violence. And we know research shows us that these events definitely increase the likelihood of later developing depression. And media addiction. Studies on smartphone use have shown us that the more time spent in front of screens, big or small, equals a higher likelihood of becoming depressed. Social media can get overwhelming. It can lead to loss of productivity, decreased self-esteem and confidence, and cause depression. And sleep contributes to depression. There's a complex relationship between sleep and depression. Poor sleep patterns can cause or exacerbate depression, and depression causes sleep disturbances. Withdrawal from drugs or a history of substance abuse can be related to depression. So if you are depressed and you can stop drinking alcohol, because alcohol does exactly what you don't want to do when you're depressed. Alcohol is a depressant, and so it's best to have none, zero. And age is sometimes a contributor to depression. So while depression is not a normal part of aging, and the older person is more vulnerable, there are many biological, social, and psychological changes that occur with growing old. And some people just struggle with the process of aging, and it might culminate into depression. So I know that's a long list of factors, but it's important to consider all of these factors, biological, psychological, and social, and see that while biology and psychology play a role in people's environment, and the social context can play the person's environment and their social context can play a really large role in the development of depression. And lots of times what happens is when we experience depression, you go to the doctor and you get handed some antidepressants, and we tend to think that depression is just a biological issue, but it's much more than that. For the treatment of depression to be effective, a therapist will utilize a multidimensional approach to thoroughly consider all the possible causes. An individual treatment program that directly addresses the specific causes will be devised for the client. And it's important for you to pay attention for yourself what you see as are triggering your depression, because it's so different for everybody. Depression, the treatment for depression, depression is not a single problem. There's not a single cause, and there's not a single treatment. Depression is caused by many contributing factors. There's no single cause, and likewise, no single best treatment. In my practice, I estimate that I've treated probably close to 3,000 people with depression over the years. And what I know for sure is that there is no single magic bullet treatment. Just as depressed clients come in all shapes and sizes and from all walks of life, the presentation of the illness is varied and unique to each person. The treatment needs to be well thought out, evidence-based, and make sense for the client. And so, what about medication? When we look at depression through the lens of biology, which it is, currently medication is the most common form of treatment. And medication is effective for the vegetative symptoms like sleep and appetite. And for someone who's in a really dark place it can raise the floor and give the person a hand up so that they can get to their therapy sessions. But medication, and we know this, the research shows us that medication alone is not enough. It has the highest rates of relapse. So if you have a positive effect with antidepressant medications, that is great. But that doesn't, you're feeling good, you need to get to a therapist and get learning some coping skills. And that's because medication doesn't teach you coping skills. It doesn't teach you about stress management. It doesn't teach you realistic explanatory styles. Medication doesn't teach you how to build skills and maintain positive relationships. It also doesn't teach you flexibility and discriminating cognitive skills, which is really important for depression. You don't learn effective decision-making skills and strategies while you're taking medicine. It doesn't give you the ability to build and maintain a support network. You don't learn how to transcend an adverse personal history, or you don't learn how to build a realistic and motivating future. And so these are some of the things that you need to do in addition to the medication. In treatment planning, it makes sense to consider people's vulnerabilities to depression. Once we understand these vulnerabilities, we can develop targeted and effective treatments to help people overcome their depression and live well. So the risk factors or the vulnerabilities to depression are something that you can look at yourself by going through the list of all of the causes and find out what it is for you that you think is kind of the root or the trigger for your depressive episodes. And in studies of people depression being that seem to set people up for being at higher risk for depression. Researchers have found that it's not so much what has happened to people that increases their risk for depression, as it is the way that they interpret or respond to what has happened to them. So this is where many of the depression risk factors are found. The phenomenon of attributional style. So this phenomenon it's a pattern of how people unconsciously interpret events, and it's key to their vulnerability. So it's something that, you learn by modeling. It's just the way that you learn to think about things. And sometimes that's a really big part of the problem with depression. People with depression have a past orientation, we call it. So we'll hear people say things like, my past controls me, or I'm depressed because of my trauma, or I'm a victim of trauma, or I'll never be happy until I have a happy childhood. They just get stuck in the past, and they use the past to predict the future. The people who live well with depression are those people who can face forward and ask, how do I want my life to be? And so that's where counseling and psychotherapy come in. So for example, many people have experiences of being made fun of or being bullied or being harassed on the playground, at school. It's interpreted in a few different ways. So one person may respond with thinking, well, that was really difficult for me. I'm pretty resilient. I learned a lot about myself. I guess that's why I don't let people push me around now that I'm a grown-up. Whereas the depressed person is likely to recall the experience of being bullied on the playground and respond differently. They might say things like, that experience was sure difficult for me. I'm really unlucky. Nobody has ever really liked me. I guess that's why I'm such a pushover now as an adult, allowing other people to walk all over me. I'll never be anything but a people pleaser. So you hear that, right? Sort of being stuck in the past, using the past to predict the future. And so when you're depressed, how do you get out of that, right? I mean, you could read a book, you could watch a podcast, talk to friends. Some friends are really helpful. They say things like, "Oh, come on, you just got to get over it, suck it up, move on." And that's not usually very helpful. So if you came to see me, what we would do is my role would be to teach you how to acknowledge and feel the feelings regarding the experience. So, when you're having reoccurring memories of painful experiences like that, often it brings up pain and humility and anger, resentment. Lots of negative. Recalling the memory and having feelings is what is happening for you. And trying to deny those feelings can just create more problems, which is something I see quite often. The feelings come rushing up. You think, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. It's just something from the past. I need to just get over it. And you don't allow the feelings, and then you just get yourself into trouble fighting yourself. Feelings need to have space to be felt, like waves in the ocean. Can't stop them. But emotions are not good at guiding the ship. So once you give permission to your emotions to be felt, the waves may crash around for a bit, but once the water calms, then you can think more rationally. So we call this skill distinguishing between so we take time to feel the feelings, ride the waves of the emotions, and then once you feel validated and acknowledged, your feelings feel valid, then you can move on to thinking more logically. So if you were with me and we were talking about this situation with the being bullied in elementary school, I would show you some alternate ways of interpreting that negative experience. I might ask you to have an imaginary conversation with your 8-year-old self. Together, we would ask the 8-year-old part of you if that 8-year-old feels proud of you for holding on to that grudge for so long, for all these years. I might ask you, how old was the kid that said the mean things to you way back then? 8, 9, probably the same age as you were then, right? If that kid, just imagine this happened, if that same elementary aged kid walked in the room right now and said those same things to you right now, to you as an adult, and that kid as a kid, what do you think that would feel like? And you might laugh. You might say to me, well, I would tell the kid to take a hike because I don't really care what that kid thinks. It's just a silly kid. And you may even notice feeling some compassion towards the schoolyard bully as you consider the memory from this angle, sitting here as an adult. And there we go. Looking at the memory in this perspective, it does seem a bit laughable. And the inflexibility, the inflexible thinking that held you in that pain of being bullied, perhaps has shifted just a little bit. It's not grand movements, but we do it. This is how we do it. In therapy, we work on small shifts in perspective. Bit by bit, you learn more You learn more to be more flexible in your responses. You become more discriminating and a more critical thinker. You learn to ask questions and seek evidence for your beliefs. And over time, you become less depressed. Okay. Let's talk about expectations. Thinking errors that we see that often gets us stuck in depression is unrealistic expectations. So our expectations are the filter for how we judge everything we experience. And our expectations are, set up based on what we have experienced. But the question is, how do you know whether your expectations are realistic? Who can you ask? Where can you check? Where can you look it up? People with depression don't ask, usually. They don't check. They have unrealistic expectations, but they don't know that they have unrealistic expectations. So they walk around sad and disappointed. Managing expectations is a skill that once acquired will provide great potential for living with depression. So in my practice, I work with a lot of individuals and couples to challenge and overcome unrealistic expectations. So working on expectations of self that might be incredibly high, and arguing with those expectations, and expectations of your partner. I see this a lot with young couples, the bringing baby home situation where one parent's at home taking care of the child, the other parent's out at work, and then the parent coming home from work comes home and has these sometimes grand expectations, like that their spouse is going to have, the baby taken care of and the house spotless and dinner ready. And then when it's not done, there's a lot of disappointment and hard feelings. And so simply managing those expectations gets everybody feeling a lot better. All right. Just bear with me here. I see this slide was in the wrong place. So when do you need to get professional help? It's really important that if you are experiencing suicidal thoughts or feelings, that you don't walk, you run to your therapist, or if you haven't got one, you find one. If you feel stuck or overwhelmed or hopeless, you need to get help. If you're lacking support to reality test or do this arguing with, for example, if you don't have anybody to help you with that, then you should get professional help. You should do it before it gets hopeless and before it gets to a crisis point. And when potential life-changing situations must be made with clarity. So, don't go, making big decisions about, ending relationships or starting new relationships or making big moves to new places when you're in a period of depression. You should talk to somebody first. And you should get help when you're affecting other people. If the people in your life are giving you feedback that your depression is, affecting them in a negative way, then you should get help. Okay. All right. So how do you live well with depression? You should see your doctor. If you haven't already, you should see your doctor and know, what else is going on for you that might be causing your depression. You should stop drinking alcohol. You should keep a mood journal. And I realized, you know, if you're in a place where you're feeling quite unmotivated and, you know, and it's difficult to get out of bed and shower, and then being presented with a list of all the things you should do so you can feel better, that can feel overwhelming in itself. You live well with depression is meant, I guess, as a guide of all the things that you could do, you know, when you can. But it's really important that this list comes along with a big fat dose of self-compassion and coaching and kindness, and it's not a bunch of shouldn't on yourself. So you know, when you get up in the morning and you can't do much else except for sip your coffee, you know, you're not allowed to, you know, be saying, oh, I should be doing yoga, oh, I should be writing in my mood journal. No, you get up and you do what you can, because during those times, if you're in a real valley, it's important to just put one foot in front of the other and do what you can. And you know, this list is here, I guess, to give you an idea of all the things that you can do and that will help you, and that we know will help depressed people, that, you know, are kind of proven to be helpful. So if you have depression, you need to learn how to distinguish between your feelings and facts. You have to get in touch with your emotions, learn how to feel them, and learn that they are different than your thoughts. So there's rational thought and there's feeling, and they both are important and they both have a role to play, and they're both good. One is not bad and one is not good. There are a number of studies that show us that exercise does help with depression, and in some studies it shows that it is as effective as antidepressants. So just, you know, roll your yoga mat out and doing some online yoga with Adrian, or, you know, whoever you like to watch, or putting your runners on and going out for a 10-minute walk or something, getting some fresh air. Exercise is important. Doing fun things, and doing fun things often, is important. You know, getting your laugh on, turning on music and TV, things that you know, bring joy to your heart, are important. Getting in contact and staying in contact with other people. So right now, this is how we do it on Zoom. Eating more fruit and vegetables and supplementing with vitamin D is a good idea. Being goal-oriented, but and not getting too stuck down in the analyzing and planning. What we know about people with depression is that we often get stuck in the weeds. I can tell you I experienced that actually prepping for this webinar. So yeah, it's important to have a goal and then work and then take steps to get towards that goal, and move yourself out of the planning stage by just taking one step at a time and getting action, taking some taking some time each day to think about what's good in your life helps your mood, and getting support and getting help when you need it is really important. All right, and that's it. Let me check my time. Okay, So self-care is another big one. I'll just quickly give you this challenge, this homework. If you came to see me in my office at the end of the session, I would say, how do you feel about homework? And if you said, yes, I like homework, I would issue you something like this. Depending on what kind of day you're having in your depression. If you're in the depths of a valley of your depression, I wouldn't issue you this homework assignment. But if you happen to be, on a, up on a hill or even on the slope, I would say, hey, how about we prepare for the next time that you're in the valley? Because you're getting so good at understanding yourself and knowing what you need when you're depressed. I'd like you to create a first aid box for your next dog day or depression day or bad day or whatever you want to call it. And so you get yourself a shoebox or a fancy decorator box from HomeSense or whatever kind of box you like, and you fill it up with all the things that would make you feel wonderful on your next dog day. So a tea, a new little journal, and a pen, a reminder, a list of the songs that you like, playlist, that kind of thing. So I'm going to leave you with that homework to create a first aid box for yourself. And with that, I'll wrap it up.
Wonderful, thanks. If you want to stop your screen share, and anyone who needs to head out, I want to thank you for spending some time with us and let you know that if you go to the website, you will see a lot of these webinars, about 30 of them that we've already taped during COVID on the blog page. And this webinar, along with her slideshow, will be on Ramona's page of our website as well. And we have a number of them coming up in the new year. I think we've got 3 posted and about another 5 that we'll post in the next couple of weeks. So you're always welcome to join us, and I wish you a very good week. For those of you sticking around, we have some time, maybe 10 or so minutes that we can take some questions. I'm looking at the chat and the Q&A, and we had some technical issues. And I, as the host, you can get kind of worked up about these things, but there was nothing I could do about any of them. And I started to think, well, we've never had these before. Zoom is just sort of helping to demonstrate what depression can feel like, because there were these weird black boxes, Ramona, that were just covering your parts of your slides sometimes. And it was a bit kind of slow and glitchy and would just pause, but not very often. And I don't think it got in the way at all of your presentation, but we noticed them, and whatever. We're all doing enough Zoom these days to know this stuff just happens. We have definitely some people just saying thanks. Someone mentioned in the first couple of minutes they already had learned a lot by learning that that all or nothing thinking can actually be related to depression. And the idea to keep a mood journal really appealed to a number of people as well. Really simple and helpful suggestion. Someone is asking you, how can you tell the difference between feeling down and depression? What a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because a lot of times, people will say, I feel depressed, and depressed is a feeling. So it's something, you don't need to be afraid of. But depression is a disorder of mood. So it's the severity of the symptoms, and then how long is it lasting, right? So if it's, are you feeling down for days on end, and is it a bad day or a bad day and a half, or is it a bad week, and now you're missing out on work, and you're disconnecting from family and friends, and things in your life are really changing, right? That's what we're looking for, is the severity and the changes. That's how we would distinguish. We would diagnose depression versus, it's just a blue mood.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. How do we know when we have enough coping strategies to not require medication? And how long are meds required?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good question. So what was the first part? How do we know when we have enough coping skills?
Yeah, to not require medication. Mm-hmm.
So I think how you know is you start off by knowing thyself, right? You really start paying attention to your mood, good days and bad days, monitoring that, and then once you start learning some skills, changing some things, are you feeling better compared to 2 months ago when you were recording? Or is it a little bit better, but you're still having a lot of there's a lot of depression there still, so you're limping along, you are changing things, you're coping a bit better, but it feels really dark still. So then that's when you might want to see the doctor. And then how long would you take meds for? So because I don't prescribe medication, I'm not qualified to answer that. But what I guess, because I see a lot of clients who take psychotropic medications, I could probably just give you an idea. Like, I can tell you what I know, and that is that a lot of times patients will come and the doctors have told them that they should expect to be on the meds like 6 months to a year. And I see a lot of clients that take antidepressant meds for really long term. So it really is, it's variable, I guess, is the short answer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Someone is saying that one thing that they really appreciated hearing about is a reminder around expectations. And a couple of people mentioned that was particularly helpful. Someone is asking a question that I just can't resist, and also to an opportunity to tackle, because I love this topic. It's about what's the best kind of therapy, and hearing that CBT is the #1 kind of therapy. Ramona will know how much I love tackling this. I want to say, and therapists know this, but it's taking some time for the general population to hear the news that lots of different kinds of therapy that are out there are all equally helpful. What really matters is that you find a person, a therapist, who's a good fit for you, someone you trust, someone you feel comfortable with, and that however they're describing your problem and the solutions and the pathway to healing that they lay out for you, that it makes sense to you. And that will sound different from a therapist who's primarily working from a cognitive behavioral perspective, or a narrative perspective, or a psychodynamic perspective. So there isn't one kind of therapy that's the best. And most of us, and I think you'd say this too, Ramona, that you work from an integrative perspective. So if that's true, we've got to have some flexibility. We tend to think a certain way as therapists, according to what we believe about what it means to be human, and the struggles that we have as humans. But we need to have some flex. So I know I'm mostly psychodynamic, but clients who come and say CBT, I think is going to work best for me, we do some CBT. Would you answer that similarly, Ramona? Yeah.
Yes, yes, I would answer it. Yeah, very much the same. I think that um, yeah, like when I'm at work, I imagine like all the types of therapy that we learned at school is like in a big red mechanic toolbox, and then I know them all, or I know lots of them, and then I'm gonna use what works for you. Like, just like if you brought me a car, I would go get the right tools that I need to your car work. Doesn't matter. I'm going to use the method or the treatment type that works for you.
Yeah.
And with depression, a lot of time with depression, um, I'll talk to clients about coming at it from the front end and the back end. So if there's like sometimes these negative ways of thinking are instilled along with some maybe a trauma base, um, and that's real. So we might have to do some trauma work, to boost confidence and boost esteem. And while we're doing that trauma work, which is like back end work, working on childhood stuff, um, we're also doing the cognitive work, paying attention to current day thoughts and modifying them, challenging them. So it's really it's a holistic kind of approach using a number of different methods all the time.
Yeah, I love that metaphor.
So I think it's like going to the mechanic and saying which wrench which is the best wrench.
Yeah.
Well, but what kind of car do you have, and what's wrong with your car, and what's the diagnostic, and there's so much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Um, well, I want to thank you for your questions, everybody, and lots of comments here. I think we're going to end because we're just a little bit over time. But I know if you have outstanding questions we haven't had a chance to answer, that Ramona would be happy to connect with you if you want to send an email to River's Edge, to info@riversedgecounseling.com. I know that they'll forward it to either Ramona or I, and we'd love to hear from you. And certainly would love to see you at any future webinar as well. So with that, I want to thank you again, Ramona, for a wonderful, informative presentation, and wish you all a very, very good week. Take care.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole.